Welcome to this week's Therapeutic Tuesday. This week we have another filmed mini session. This week is with Kat. And Kat has her mum coming to visit for an extended period of time and is struggling with how to manage boundaries, how to protect the progress that she's been making on the recovery journey. And so we get into a framework around how I suggest that she communicates her needs, but also how to really honor and take care of what she needs to for her own body. So I think this is a really helpful session for anyone who struggles with boundaries or struggles with knowing how to support and protect the recovery process around other people. So here is Kat. I'm sorry it's so late for you. It's like 10:30 at night, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, and I've got is the lighting okay? I've got a strange home, so
no, lighting's good. It feels quite theatre-like. So it's quite dramatic. But no, that's fine. Thank you. So, yeah, look, thank you so much for being willing to do this. I really appreciate it. I know people find these sessions really quite helpful, I think, because it's real as opposed to just me kind of pontificating some sort of nonsense into a camera. So, so thank you. And do you want to just give me I obviously got the email that you sent to Jenny, but do you want to just give me a little bit more context in terms of what you're hoping to get from the time we've got, perhaps a little bit just about where you are at this point in the recovery process as well?
Okay. Yes. Oh, it's a little bit of a head trip to be talking to you after watching you for so many hours on my screen.
Oh dear, I'm sorry.
So, yes, the situation is, I first became ill about 6 years ago, and around about September, so 5 months ago, something like that, I was kind of in a place. I was in as good a place as I thought I had been in a long time. I was starting to think about actually taking on some part-time work. I had quite a lot of activity happening, and then I had this huge crash, and I've basically been in it since then. I discovered Reset, which has been really super helpful. But right now, my daily capacity is, for me and for my history, is pretty minimal still. So let me think. On a day-to-day basis, like, I'm at home most of the time. I'm not in bed, but I'm not really going anywhere. Occasionally, I will go and see somebody. I'll maybe have 2 or 3 sort of interactions of some kind in the week. That'll usually be someone coming to me. But my day-to-day, I'm kind of religious about my morning meditation. After lunch, I've got a couple of hours where I lie down and meditate and do some gentle yoga. I'm just basically managing to just about take care of myself.
Okay.
And I feel like I had a few months of really intense struggle emotionally, sort of at the end of the year, where I was just like, what is happening? Why am I in such a mess? And then just in the last month, I've started to find this peacefulness and this acceptance and this ability to just be okay with what's happening, and sort of using all the tools I've been learning from you, kind of grounding, coming into my body and feeling like some actual deep relaxation and calm. And that's great. And my mum is arriving from England in 2 weeks. She's staying with me. I live in a house bus, which is basically just one big room. And so that's kind of, I'm kind of basically wondering how I'm going to manage that.
Right.
I've got a separate space for her to sleep in, because last time she came here, she was sleeping in the same space. But I know it's going to really change. You know, I'm spending so much time alone right now, And I have a history of sort of really strong helper pattern, and particularly with her, like when I first fell ill. Well, no, it wasn't when I first fell ill, but part of the beginning of my illness, she was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer, and I went back to England for a while to support her just after I'd injured my back. So I basically put my own healing and everything on hold, and there were all these different ways in which I was pushing myself. And that, I kind of got ill when I came back to New Zealand 8 months later. So it sort of all tied in together, this sort of sense of responsibility.
How is your mum doing now in her health?
She's doing really well. Like, she's managing it really well. She doesn't really have too many symptoms or much to deal with on a kind of physical, daily problem level. But she's doing lots of lifestyle, diet modification, etc., and she's doing really well in herself. Yeah.
How is if you don't mind me asking, and feel free to give me not much of an answer if it doesn't feel okay to give any more, but how is your relationship with her? Like, it sounds like she's been on her own healing journey. So is there a certain amount of kind of sensitivity to your circumstance and needs, or can it be quite fractious at times in that dynamic?
That's a really interesting question. I think both. We're pretty close, and she does have a lot of understanding and a lot of care. And yes, she also, like you say, is on her own healing journey and understands some of what that means. But on the kind of day-to-day, with me dealing with such intense fatigue and a day-to-day level of actually just struggling to manage and maintain, that's, like the last time I saw her was 2 years ago, and then a year before that. And I think she has understanding, but there's a sense of, explain it. There's a sense of, it may not be her, it may be a sense of me feeling kind of guilty that I need to take as much time and space as I do. And that when she's here, it's like she wants to connect with me, she wants to be with me, she wants to, yeah, it's, yeah, that's kind of an answer.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. And I think, I think almost everybody that suffers from fatigue in some form has some version of a struggle with this, which is why I think it's a really good topic to be talking about. And I think that part of the challenge here is that the nature of fatigue, and particularly chronic fatigue, is very different to a lot of other conditions and illnesses. Like, for example, even if someone's in a quite severe and difficult place with something like cancer, that sometimes just going off and being in a different environment, being around people that you enjoy being around, sort of can give you a lift of energy in a sense. And there's not necessarily going to be a payback and a consequence for that. Whereas with the kind of sensitivity of the kind of ME chronic fatigue journey, part of the challenge then is that it's just different. It's different rules to the kind of rules of engagement, let's say, in terms of how your body will respond to things. And just being more positive and uplifted in mood doesn't necessarily equate to an uplift in the physical side. In fact, it can be the opposite sometimes. So I think in these situations, and it sounds like there's sort of some pros and cons. Like there's positive things about being around your mum and having some connection. There may be some more practical support that's available for that period of time, but there's also the challenge that it sounds like you've worked really hard to get to the point that you've started to see some meaningful progress in the last month. So there's probably quite a lot of you that feels really protective about that progress that's there, that it's like you can feel the impact of being in more of a healing state, and that needs time to develop. Like, more time in a healing state hopefully will start to show as more physical recovery. And if that gets thrown a long way off track, there's obviously a part of you that feels quite protective against that.
Yeah. And I don't feel like I'm super anxious about it like the last time she was coming. But I am also aware that I don't want to just kind of, it's not going to be the same as me being here on my own and doing selfishly whatever I feel like I need to do at any given moment. And I need to kind of accept that and understand that it's like how in a moment to moment kind of timeline am I going to be able to sort of be in a space of being able to compromise and also take care of what I need to take care of, and how it then connect to my body, especially if like my health patterns triggered, or just it's
yeah. So I think a big part of this is it comes down to the planning, and it comes down to the kind of ideally the communication in advance. Like, I think one of the tendencies we can have is particularly if we've got a helper pattern, we don't want to be seen to make a fuss. Like, we just want to kind of be seen to be kind of convenient and slotting in. Don't want to be seen to kind of making drama, or kind of, oh, look, I have a very special circumstance and therefore I need special things to make it. And yet at the same time, when you're dealing with a condition like this, it is tricky for other people to understand what's happening. And that's where the more we can do to educate, and the more we can do to actually empower others, actually that takes often an anxiety away for them as well. So I sort of think about it like there's a what, there's a why, and there's a how. So there's explaining what's happening, like, and it may be your mum already knows quite a bit of this, it may be that there's more to learn, but giving as much information as you can around fatigue, chronic fatigue, the fact it's fluctuating, the fact that it's kind of that rest is really important. Maybe send us some of the videos that you've kind of found helpful, either mine or other people's online, but really taking the time to really help her understand the what. And then it's helping her understand sort of the why, like, this is why I'm in the circumstance that I'm in. And this is also why I've been improving over the last, it may not yet be physical improvement that you're experiencing, but you can feel the shift in your nervous system, which is the kind of prerequisite towards that. So this is why I'm improving. This is what I've been doing. This is why I am where I am. And then this is how you can help me. Like, this is how you can be around me. If you want to support me, these are the things that would really help. So, for example, making sure I'm not disturbed in my rest times. Maybe having even a code word where it's like, if you're starting to really struggle, you just say bananas, whatever that code word might be. But having a sort of way of saying, look, I just need to get out of this situation right now. So it's this is what the condition is. This is why I am where I am. And this is how you can be around me. And often that how is a big relief to other people, because they're not constantly kind of questioning themselves the whole time. How does that feel like something you'd be able to communicate to her and she'd be able to hear, or what comes up when I mention that?
It does. Yeah, it does feel like, and it feels like that's already in progress. And I already mentioned to her that I need to have a conversation in advance with her about what she needs, what to expect. She's watched your 3-part nervous system video thing. So, so she has some understanding. So, it's, I think that's achievable. And I think some of that is about me letting go of my kind of guilt, or, kind of in the moment, just I know from past experience with her or with other people, I'm always trying to just squeeze out that little bit of whatever I have to give to the other person. And in the space where I'm only just managing to accept how little I can actually do in order to be balanced right now myself, let alone kind of conveying that to someone else. So it's, that's kind of where I think that's a lot of where the challenge lies, and not even necessarily in what she says or thinks or feels,
Yeah, and probably that tendency where, let's say she's there and she says, "Oh, let's pop out and go and get a cup of tea somewhere or something," and your body's kind of screaming no, and then your kind of guilt pattern is, my mum's flown literally halfway across the world to come and to be with me, and you start trying to persuade yourself that, oh, maybe I'll feel like, kind of stuff that deep down not to be true, but it's just enough to convince you in the moment. Like, maybe I'll feel better if I go, maybe this time will be different, and I'm with my mom, and so you start trying to persuade yourself, and then you go, and the likelihood is, for the stage of recovery you're at in the moment, the likelihood is that it will, if you ignore your body, there'll be a consequence to that. So there's something I think also about being like ruthlessly honest with yourself. And it's almost the more honest and the more boundaried and the more kind of protected you are of yourself, actually the less likely you are to have the negative consequences, which then end up compounding on themselves and making the whole thing all the more challenging and difficult.
Definitely.
What would be the ways that you would try to, what would be the things that you would say to yourself that would convince you to ignore your body? Like if you're in that moment where there's like, you're invited to do something, or how would you trick yourself in that moment?
I think I would just have this inner voice saying, "Oh, it's okay. You can do this. Like you've got the energy. It's all right. You know, just that's a really that's
so I think this is helpful to understand. How would that voice be different to a genuine voice that's like, no, I actually have the energy to do this? So there's the version which is like, oh no, I'm like, I can do this, to the version where you're trying to persuade yourself. What's the difference?
it's not really necessarily so much about the language. It's probably more the feeling, like the actual sensation of it. You know, it's kind of that like that edgy, you know, wired feeling.
Right.
That's just kind of a bit sort of, oh, I have to do this.
Yeah.
So it's not so much persuasion. Like that's not a way that I'm trying to persuade myself, though, is it? I think it's just it is a feeling, and it is something I'm just really getting to grips with of that massive aspect of myself, really. Yeah.
So maybe it's there's a, when something is right, there's a sort of feeling of, yes, I can do this. And when you're kind of pushing yourself, maybe it's less of a feeling you can do it and more of a kind of like, you know, trying to persuade yourself or trying to convince yourself or rationalizing. Or the reason why I'm focusing at this is if you remember the phrase, if you can see it, you don't have to be it. So the more you can kind of spot the pattern, the easier then it is when that pattern comes up to go, hang on, I know what's happening here.
There is something, I think this is kind of the same thing that I was thinking about today, which is it's this sense that I have to be available. So I was thinking about, okay, so yeah, there's a certain times when I just definitely need to be in a deep rest meditative space, but I don't want to just be like, as soon as I come out of that, I've got to be, here I am socializing. You know, I also need time alone when I'm not in that space. But I know that my tendency is to feel like if somebody's here and somebody's around, then I need to be kind of really present and engaged and on, you know? Right. So it's like just that general sensation of being a sort of tending to somebody else is just kind of, it's like that. That's kind of
so if you're not in deep rest, then you should be available. Like there's almost like there wouldn't necessarily normally be a middle ground of, I'm pottering. Like I'm not in like active deep rest healing, but I'm also not up for social interaction. Like I just want to kind of be with myself. That perhaps would be a harder thing to give yourself permission for.
Yeah, exactly. And especially because I am alone so much at the moment, and there's so few people I feel safe to spend time with and that I can feel like I'm in my body with at this point in time. So it's like there's that. The exercise is going to be how to be around someone else. And it's like with her, I feel like there is that sense that I kind of have to be available. And, you know, that's a historical thing. So it's almost like just this underlying, ongoing belief that I need to shift.
and if you're running the you have to be available pattern, what's the likely consequence of that?
That I'll just go into overdrive and then go into exhaustion afterwards.
Which means you'll be even less available.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is sort of the
Yeah.
irony, right? It's like the more you put pressure on yourself to be available when you can't be, the more likely you are to crash, and not just crash, but also sort of feel your nervous system feel more sensitized to those situations. Because each time you push through and you ignore your body feels it needs to shout louder next time to get your attention. And so actually when you push through to be available, next time you're around someone, your body's more aggravated and more on edge because it fears that that's going to happen again.
Yeah.
To quantify a bit where I think you are at the moment, you're obviously working really hard on being in a healing state, where at the moment that's primarily being in a healing state in your own kind of safe kind of place, in a sense, like in relatively kind of isolated from the world. And that's the kind of foundation point that most people start with, which is it's hard enough to get to a healing state by yourself, but you kind of really work on that and you're making really good progress with that. The next step is then, how do you stay in that healing state whilst around other people? But it sounds like your mum's visit is a little kind of early in your development, let's say, around that. And so it's all the more, how do you protect your boundaries? Like, how do you, and I think part of the challenge is that, and that's part of what I was kind of pointing towards, that we get quite good at lying to ourselves. So what I mean by that is that in that moment, we justify why we're doing what we're doing. Or we know that we're ignoring our body, but we even justify ignoring our body. And the consequence of that is nearly always that we end up having some form of a crash, which means then we end up not being available anyway, but we've got the added pain of having to deal with the crash as part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in past situations, I've done that a lot, and I've not ever crashed that hugely until after the period of time with the person. But right now, I feel like I'm just way too sensitive to actually even do that. Yeah. You know, way too sensitive and fatigued to even like allow that to happen. You know?
Yeah, in some ways, a sign of progress is that you're actually closer to your body now, which means that you're going to get the information more quickly. One of the problems is when we're really disconnected, we push through, and then the sort of situation passes, and then we have a massive crash afterwards. It's actually a sign of progress in many ways that we're getting much more immediate information, because then you can actually respond to that, and you can actually support yourself in the moment before you end up having the crash or having the consequences of that.
Yeah, that is kind of what it feels like. It seems like I've almost been in stage 2 for like 5 years, and only and kind of gone into stage 1 in the last 6 months, and it's actually like, oh, okay, I actually need to rest, like actually rest. Yeah. You know, and I think the circumstance of mum coming is yeah, it's a big challenge, but it's also an opportunity. Yeah. So what you were saying about the bubble, yes, it's true. And it's like, there's certain people who I've been practicing that with. Okay, I could spend time with this person and I could still connect to my body, and I don't feel like I'm being pulled out of myself. And, you know, I can assert boundaries with these people, and some people I just have to, you know right now. And yeah, just if I really tune in and think about the actual reality of, you know, living in a home where I can't even just go and be in my own room because it's like all one room. Yeah, it's kind of scary, actually.
Sure. But I think, as you say, if you know, I talked about the what, the why, the how. There's also the what if, and the what if is, what if you can manage this in a way that works with your mum while she's here? Which, as you say, when she leaves, you've grown your comfort zone, and you've learned to be, you've built trust with your nervous system that you can be in a healing state and listen to your body whilst being in contact with other people, because that is the next step of the journey anyway. Like, it's happening a bit perhaps premature of what you might have chosen, but it is the next step of the journey. So it's not like it's not wasted learning, in a sense. Yeah.
yeah, and sort of if I can actually explain that to her and just be like, well, this is just the reality.
Right.
And just not, I think, just not, yeah, I think I've probably had a lot of shame about that in the past. And if I can kind of just tune in a bit more to just my own acceptance with it and communicate and just be like, yeah, this is how much or how little I need or cannot do or whatever. And that's just how it is.
And ultimately, she's your mum, and your mum's ultimate wish is for her daughter to be happy and healthy. And so even if that's a learning for both of you together, it's absolutely, if you can orchestrate it in such a way that you together can work together to mean that at the end of this visit, there's actually been progress, that's going to mean a lot to both of you. It's not just you that's going to benefit from that. Her coming and you playing out your old patterns and sort of just about getting through and having a massive crash afterwards is not going to feel good to her either. Or you constantly crashing along the way because you're ignoring your body is also not going to feel good to her either. That it's her wish, I'm sure, is absolutely going to be to support you. And that means that it might be at times that she has wished to go and do things together and that you put up a boundary to that. And it might be, times where, you guys are really kind of in a really good conversation and you have to say, whatever you choose a code word to be, banana, I need to stop, I need to go and rest. But actually that has the potential to bring you guys closer rather than to create more distance. Because when we keep reacting to the world around us and the world around us is causing us to crash, that also puts up barriers. And the more we can let someone into the intimacy of our immediate experience and ask for help and ask for support, that also brings closeness and connection.
Yeah. There's definitely a vulnerability there, to share that and just share the actual reality of what it really looks like. Yeah.
Yeah. Intimacy is into me see.
Yeah.
So it's letting someone see into our experience. And that means taking away the shame and the judgment and the inner critic and all that stuff that says you shouldn't be where you are, or it's your fault, or it's this, or it's that. It's trying to take as much as that away as you can and going, right now, this is the reality. You didn't choose this reality. You don't want this reality, but this is the reality. And these are the pieces of the jigsaw which will help things move forwards. And it's doing the best you guys can to navigate that, ideally together.
Yeah, and the other thing that's just come up as you're saying that is thinking, well, she has needs, she has her own things that she has to do, and on a daily basis, and I can't just be like, it has to be like this.
Yeah. Well, if I was talking to your mum right now, the thing that I would say is that the best way she can support you is by also supporting her. And that means going off and doing things that she'd like to do, things that make her feel kind of excited. So she's not spending the whole time kind of pandering to all the kind of sensitivities that are important for you, but she's also going and filling herself up and doing things that bring her pleasure. And yes, there may be disappointment at times that you're not always able to join her in doing those things. But the more that she's able to give herself permission to go and do the things that make her happy and bring her joy, the more ultimately she's going to be able to be emotionally available to you as well.
Yeah. And that's kind of the challenge, because it doesn't feel like she doesn't tend to have the independent idea to just go off and do something. She kind of wants to do the thing together. So it's going to be a case of
that. That's her challenge, right?
Yeah, it's almost like I have to say, okay, can you just go somewhere for a while, and that that's the thing that's hard for me, is kind of is that like that her not having so much of the independent motivation to go off and do whatever.
Yeah.
That it feels like it's always I'm being so demanding or pushing away or having to keep enforcing.
And that's also, again, in a sense, the part of what I think would be really good to communicate up front and say, look, I noticed that I can end up feeling responsible for your happiness because, you sort of, there's not so much independence and having those ideas. And what would really help me would be for you to see if you can think about some things and, have the kind of courage, which is having the courage to get on a plane and come halfway around the world. So I believe she can take a few steps further in terms of, finding those things to do.
Yeah.
And her going off and doing those things and then coming back into connection with you is going to bring new energy into that as well. And you can share in, what positive and fun experiences she has from that.
Yeah. Yeah. So some communication in advance, definitely.
Yeah. Communication in advance and radical honesty with yourself during as well. Like really see if you can spot those old patterns that come in, particularly the helper pattern, which would get you to ignore your own needs. And the more progress you can make with that, that's going to be not just a step forwards for now, but a step forwards for the overall recovery process as well.
Yeah. And something I was also thinking about was this sense that of, not being so attached to the idea of being in a deep, relaxing, healing, calm state all of the time, because it's probably not actually going to be possible.
Yeah.
And just be like, that's okay. It's not going to kill me.
Totally.
It's just part of the lesson.
Yeah. Take away any perfectionist pattern that's like, I've got to be doing this perfectly or I'm not going to move forwards. Yeah. How long till your mum comes?
2 weeks, just under 2 weeks.
Okay. So we're probably going to put this episode out in a week. So you could also send your mum a link to the episode. And if so, hi Kat's mum. And you don't have to, it's entirely up to you. Say that again?
That would be brave.
Yeah, it would be. But I don't think there's anything that you said here which isn't entirely loving and compassionate of your mum. It's just your genuine, sincere struggle to find the best way to make it work for everyone. Do you have any final questions?
Apparently not. Nothing's coming right now.
Maybe there's no questions. It may be because it's gone 11 o'clock at night. Does it feel achievable? What we're talking about? It may feel a bit overwhelming, and there's probably some time to reflect and to kind of digest what we're talking about. But does it feel fundamentally achievable?
It's like it feels achievable in the space that I'm in now.
Okay.
And it's just how to translate that reality into the space where it's not how it is now.
Yeah, so that makes sense. And what I would then say is do the best you can to communicate this from the space you're in now. So rather than waiting until it gets too close to the time and perhaps you feel a bit more kind of overwhelmed with it, or she arrives, like use the kind of clarity and the possibility of the place you are right now, use that as the place from which to communicate.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Let me know how you get on. Send me an email in a month or so once she's been there a few weeks, and just let me know how you're doing. I'd be keen to hear. And thanks again for being willing to share your experience. It's I think one of the least talked about and biggest challenges that people, different versions of this challenge that people have in terms of how to navigate recovery whilst being around kind of friends and family and that side of things. So you're certainly not alone in this challenge, although it's a intense version of it because it's going from kind of thousands of miles away to in a very small space intimately together. So it's but you've got a lot of tools, and remember how far you've come as well.
Yeah, and I mean all of the other sort of mini sessions that I've watched have been super helpful and relevant to me in various ways. So it's just it's amazing what you're doing in that way.
Yeah, I'm very pleased how much it helps people, because I had no idea if it would, but it seems to be helpful, so I'm pleased. So thanks, Kat. I look forward to reading your email in a month or so time, and in the meantime, just be really gentle with yourself and communicate as much as you can up front.
Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you. Sleep well. Thank you. I hope you found that session helpful. I know for many people, this can be a real challenge of protecting, taking care of your own recovery journey, whilst also being caring and sensitive to those around you as well. So I hope the ideas in here have been helpful. Please do share your experience, your own, what works for you, what perhaps some of your experiences using some of the principles of this mini session in the comments below. Would love to read those and see those. Tomorrow on Wellness Wednesday, I'm going to be doing a session talking about how to get the most out of sessions. This is something that I've been thinking about doing for a while, and really almost like a bit of a checklist of when you're working with a practitioner, either here at the Optimum Health Clinic or indeed anywhere else, how you can best prepare, how you can approach sessions to get the most from them. So I look forward to talking with you about that on Wellness Wednesday tomorrow.